Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for attending. I'm Isaïe, and I will present for the next 10 minutes or so the work that I've put in at the French CEVA in the context of my PhD. So the focus of my work is on like meshing data structures in a highly parallel algorithm. Do not worry if there are a lot of unknowns or vague terms in the title, because this presentation is meant to present a lot of context, a lot of the problem and how we are attempting to solve it. So I'll be providing context on the entire high-performance computing domain. I'll talk about the work itself, which is a library called Honeycomb, and then I'll give a few quick words about like performance and what we are planning to do in the near future. So first, to give you an idea of what we're doing, a lot of solvers or methods, like for example, the finite elements methods, rely on a discrete decomposition of the problem space in order to compute a solution for a given problem. That decomposition is the mesh, and our focus, our work is to write efficient algorithm that will generate that mesh for a given geometry. So to clarify a few things, it is possible to modify the mesh during simulation, but that's not our focus, so we'll forget that for now. And mesh generation itself can be split into two big phases. A first mesh generation, which is how do we go from a geometry to a mesh, and then something called remeshing or iterative remeshing, where we're going to go from one mesh to a better or improved mesh. But well, better and improved mesh are very vague terms. So just to give you a few examples of what you might want for your mesh, you may want to have it contain different topological kind of cells. For example, if you look at this picture, the zoom should work. You can see on the outside of the object is very much unstructured, while its surface is made of 6 or 5-sided polygons. And if you look at the cut-in sides, then you can see it's only quads stacked on top of each other. Another thing that you may want is higher quality cells. So if we take, for example, one measures of quality, which is skewness of a cell, if you look at both triangles here, you can see that one is fairly balanced, the other is very elongated, very skewed. It is a good idea to remesh your inputs for your simulation to remove as many of these skewed cells as possible, because they will influence the result of the simulation in a bad way. And final example, something that you may want, is local refinement. If you look at the figure on the side, maybe there is a zone in your problem that has a lot more interaction, a lot more things going on, while others not so much. It is a good idea to make only local refinement if you want to improve accuracy in order to be more efficient with your resources. Now, these adjustments and improvements all require more compute power or add complexity to the code to generate. The good news is that hardware has evolved and provides us with enough of this compute power, but multiple problems. First, there's an entire class of bugs, of concurrency bugs, such as data races, that are absolutely not trivial to deal with at scale if your language doesn't squash those out of the box. Then leveraging the hardware, bugs aside, is not trivial either, because you have to expose a lot of work, you have to handle conflicts. There's entire jobs that are pretty much just optimization of existing codes. So there's that. And on top of that, we have issues specific to remeshing algorithm, which I'm going to show a little bit after, that have things like unpredictable memory accesses. So additional, let's say, obstacles in our problem. What we want is to find a way to deal with all these problems in order to write efficient meshing algorithm that run on highly parallel hardware. That's the idea, that's the objective. To do that, we choose to base our approach on data structures. So we decided to implement in Rust a mesh data structure so that will balance correctness and performance. The idea is that the data structure should be really not overly optimized for a single type of kernels, which is something that you see a lot in the meshing literature. Just to like really insist on that aspect of a library, we are providing building blocks. We are providing the data structures, and then the user can use kernels that we wrote for benchmarks or write its own. On the right side, you have examples of very different, I guess, meshing kernels. One that is only a cell insertion, so topology edit, and the other which is only geometry with vertex relaxation. And then for the correctness aspect, simply put, we can formalize it in a way that's, if we have a valid input and we apply a meshing operation to it, it should either give a valid output or do no changes at all, because say, for example, there's an error during the operation in the middle, a predicate fails. We do not want any edits to be validated and corrupt our data, which would give us an invalid mesh, and then it would like snowball even worse with concurrency. So that's the design idea behind our data structure. To do that, we choose to use the big bad words of the title, which are combinatorial maps. These are a specific data structure, graph-like really, which really the only thing that you need to remember for this presentation is that they give a certain number of properties, which makes enforcing correctness with regard to meshing operations easier. One such property, for example, is orientation, to have like oriented cells. These properties are enforced fairly easily with Rust's type system, and all it allows us to do in terms of ergonomy. Also, Rust squashes out all the things like data races, so that's a whole class of bugs we don't really have to worry about. Yet, synchronization was still an issue because we try to use atomics, we try to use mutexes, but both were incorrect or not adapted to our application. Atomics simply didn't give us enough guarantees with regard to instruction interleavings between threads. We could have like logically incorrect interleavings. And mutexes weren't compatible with the library aspect, as they are very error prone. You would have to expose mutexes to the user and leave him lock everything, or lock everything internally, but they're just too hard to work with, so we choose STM, which I'm not going to detail here. As a quick overview of what we have done currently, we have the 2D and 3D mesh data structures. We wrote 2D kernels simply because the data structure was finished in 2D first, and a whole bunch of things that contribute to the usability, such as IO, documentation examples, etc. And to give you an idea of the more abstract thing that I've shown at the beginning, how to go from a geometry to a mesh, that's how we do it in our small pipeline. You have your input geometry. You're going to generate a grid, an overlapping grid, and compute intersection with the geometry. Clip the parts that do not interest you. That's optional. Again, that's optional. Triangulate the mesh, because we triangulate it because our remeshing operations operate on a triangle mesh. That's it. And then you're going to apply kernels like the two ones I've shown before on a loop until we reach a final condition or for a certain amount of time. That's something that we wrote, but we wrote it fairly naively and in 2 dimensions. So to give you an idea of what we've done in terms of performance and kernels, we have that naive implementation sequential of the full remeshing pipeline, but we also benchmarked topology heavy and geometry heavy kernels. We were able to scale it pretty well to make runs with a lot of resources thanks to the computers that we have. There's no hyperthreading here. I'm not going to detail too much. We have a paper that will be coming out this month that talks about this result. It's a short paper, so not too much analysis, but it presents the result and the first observations we made. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had to say. We are always looking for users and testers, and I will be very glad to answer questions. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Saeed. I was actually about to ask, do you have any current users for this library, or no one has been
For
tested?
now, we had also at the SEVA, we had someone write our first algorithm that basically it was on the generation part, the first part, so not iterative remeshing. Someone who implemented a GPU algorithm to generate data that is used to then build the mesh, and the mesh building was done using this library.
Yeah, someone actually in the chat is showing interest and they're saying that they would be curious if they could use this for CFD mesh setup.
Well, the hardest part of the question for me is that I'm not familiar with requirements for CFD meshes. So,
but I guess then you can talk.
yeah, I mean, I'm glad I have the spot with the discussions right after. So,
Yes,
we can explore that.
that's very important. So maybe Lawrence can join the discussion if he wants to ask you about that, a little bit more about that. So this is like meant to be for finite elements methods so far.
So far, we're totally like decorrelated from the usage of the mesh after.
Okay.
We're simply, yeah, we focus on, I guess, still to some extent, the input geometry, simply because we don't have a choice. So we have to support that to some extent to be able just to like write our benchmarks. But then we are really exclusively on the part that's the mesh generation, like the first two figures. And then we generate the mesh, we can serialize it to whichever format is the used for, I don't know, CFD finite elements that the simulation can load, probably like HDF5 or VTK, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Do you have a visualization for this thing? What's the way that you have to?
Do we have what? Sorry.
Like something to visualize the mesh, or?
Yeah, we implement like both VTK serialization and a custom format for now. The custom format is more for like debugging.
Okay.
And aside for that, for visualization and debugging, like meshing algorithm, we also have our own small render tool.
And you've done benchmarks against other libraries?
Not yet.
Not
That's
yet.
something, yeah, we have, well, it's a pretty niche data structure, so we have trouble finding, let's say, relevant comparisons.